welcome everyone. For those of you who don't know, our CFO is overseas at the moment representing us in trying to get a much better deal for insurance, which is a really important thing because it's one of those big things that we spend a lot of money on. But beside me, I have Quinton Howard, and I know some of you may not know Quinton, so I'll just quickly pass over to Quinton to introduce himself.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. It's great to be able to see you all from this angle. My name's Quinton Howard. I'm the Manager for Commercial Partnerships. That part of Council involves commercial activity, procurement and contract management. And so obviously there's a couple of things in there which has come to your attention lately, and we're looking forward to resolving them in our team. Acting for Andrea this week while she's overseas, and she'll probably be online in a second, so looking forward to seeing her. It's been a few days.
Okay, well, thank you. And I understand Andrea is online. And Andrea, are you going to give us a quick introduction to this workshop?
Kia ora, councillors. Nice to be dialing in. I will hand it over to the team. I am looking forward to listening in and hearing the views of you all in terms of this review. It's got a lot to consider, and really wanting to understand where you want to take the direction on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So what we'll do is we will. I know there'll be lots of questions. What I'm going to do is, and I know we've got about an hour, is that after each section we'll then take questions on that section rather than wait till right to the end. So what we'll do first is just cover off the current rating policy system. So over to you, Raina and Vincent.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for joining us here today to talk about the rating policy review. I'm sure you're all excited to work through this one. So for those of you that are new here, our rating policy review is talking about who pays what of the pie. So last week you made decisions around how big that pie was in terms of the annual plan decisions. This is now about who pays what of that pie. So it's best practice to review this annually, which is what we try to do through the annual plan and then at a bigger go of it through the long-term plan. And it's also best to consult separately from an LTP so that our community doesn't get confused with conversations about the budget. So this is really to make sure that they're focused on who's paying what out of that pie. I will pass over to Vincent. So for those of you that don't know Vincent or haven't met him, he is my team leader of the financial planning and policy team, and he is our subject matter expert on all things rates. So he will take you through this, and yes, he'll take questions when needed.
Absolutely. Thank you, Raina. Kia ora koutou. I look forward to running you through this rating policy workshop. To start with a little agenda, so what's on today. First, the first building block is a little bit on the aim of the rating policy review, starting from what are the current rating policies, why do we want to undertake the review, and what are some of the council outcomes we tried to achieve. There are some topics we already had a little look into and we want to show today. Some of them that includes affordability, efficient use of land, which is focus on setting the rating base, land value rating versus capital value rating. And then we have a session on the commercial sector, where we focus on setting the rates differential, considerations, the downtown targeted rates, and the bids, followed by a last session on remissions. And ultimately, the last point is further rating policy issues, where I'm really, really keen to hear from you. That's the most important thing I can take away today. Now, why do we want to undertake this review? It will support council priorities and deliverables, and there has already been some announcements have already been made, such as the triennium plan stating to investigate ways to improve the residential rating system and encouraging housing development, including land value rating. Well, it's something this review can model. What are the impacts of a switch to a land value rating? The other thing, big thing for council is maintaining, ensuring rates affordability. We can do modeling on the current and future rates affordability, and I will show some today. The third thing are that we stated are looking at the commercial sector, including our differential and the downtown targeted rate. And two more things are rating policy adjustments in relation to the establishment of TRQY. Some of our rates will move to TRQY, the water charges, and we might need to make some adjustments, particularly I have mentioned here the utility provider rating. Last but not least is Council has agreed to consult on short-term accommodation provider differential as part of this annual plan. So this review we can report back on how is identification going and those kind of things. Why now? Well, you really want to make major changes to the rating policy review as part of the LTP and not during an annual plan year. And in the last LTP, we made quite some changes. Just for comparison, we introduced a new vacant land differential. We made quite considerable changes to remission policies, and we have consulted on the commercial rate differential. Now then, what are the outcomes we seek from this review? There are three, and the whole rating principles that we seek, that we focus on, is given in the appendix. So first thing, we want the rating system to be equitable and fair. And this can mean a lot of things, and that's to work through. However, one of the things that's always there to be considered are the benefits from services received and the ability to pay. So that's one thing which you always have. We also want the rating system and the rates setting to be very easy to understand and clear. And to make that happen, it needs to be quite transparent. The third big point is that the rating system supports council strategies and priorities, whether this is addressing underutilized land, which is something we heard in the last review quite often, whether this is sector affordability. And what will happen as part of the review is quite a bit of benchmarking. How do neighboring councils rate? What are their policies and other metro councils? Effective, we know we are effective. An effective rating policy review will let council decide the appropriate allocation of rates. Whatever council decides is appropriate. Achieves a balance between funding principles, but transparency and simplicity. Lets the community give their views and means council can set a lawful rate. Before moving into our current rating policy, just a little plug on the key links. Now, key links, and this is also shown in the appendix. There's a really nice graph with how the rating policies interact with each other. The RNF policy shows the activity funding as a broader picture. And for each and every activity funding, we have to do a lot of considerations. They outlined in section 113 of the Local Government Act, most prominent, who benefits, who pays, what's the time frame of benefits, and then currently the well-being consideration. As well as the financial strategy is another key impact, which shows and determines our own overall priorities. Now then, our current rating policy, and one thing that will happen in this review, we will always talk about the rates pie, and Rainer already started the session talking about the rates pie, and so we also want to show our current rating policies in a pie format. And again, one more thing, and we probably say that over and over, this rating policies review is all about how do we slice the pie. The pie doesn't get bigger or smaller. And if you look at it, you have on the left-hand side, we have our total operating revenue in 25-26, which is 894 million. Out of that one slice, the biggest slice is from rates, which is 70%, and that's essentially our RNF guides the level of rates compared to the level of fees and charges. And then we can split that rates slice into what type of rates. And the biggest, that's in the graph on the pie on your right-hand side. And the big parts are the general rate, both general rates, commercial and general rates that residential ratepayer pays pay. So that together is close to 2/3. And then the last third is the Free Water's targeted rate currently, which will move to TRKY. And then we have our commercial targeted rates, most prominent the downtown targeted rate that makes up for most of that dollar figure, and a small amount of residential targeted rates. And as we always talk about pies, this one must have just given up. Oh, thank you. Here is one more pie graph, and that shows the total rates that are collected from residential and commercial ratepayers. At the moment, it's 56-44 splits. So 56% of our total rates are collected from residential ratepayers, and the other 44% from commercial ratepayers. And any changes that you make to the rating policies, maybe changing the differential, will switch this relative distribution. So it doesn't get any bigger or smaller, it just means one sector will pay a bit more and the other one will pay a bit less. As the last thing on our current rating policy, we also have remissions, which try to mitigate some impact of rates for certain households. I have stressed out the Maori land remission policy, because that is required by legislation. We have to have a remission on Maori freehold land. We extended it to include more types of Maori land. The other remissions we can have them, and we have quite a lot of them for low income, for rural properties, penalty remissions, but I will talk more about that once we go into that a bit later on.
Thank you. Well, we might just pause for any questions. Councillor Young and then Councillor Tiffenbacher.
So I have two totally different questions. The first is, we used to have land-based rates, didn't we, until what, 1992?
Yeah, can we just keep that until, because we're going to...
Why it was changed? Why are we even thinking about it?
We're going into that.
Right, so the next question is...
This is just on these first slides that we've done, and then we're going into land value-based rates one.
Well, maybe I'll wait.
Okay. Councillor Tiffenbacher?
Yeah, so on the list where we've got the affordability and fairness and all equitableness of that, should we also have some inclusion on the commercial viability of Wellington? Just because obviously when we're looking at our differentials and things like that, part of the issue is it's becoming more expensive to do business in Wellington compared to other places around. Should that maybe be a consideration that we have?
Absolutely. Those funding decisions are incredibly complex, and you will have ability to pay, but you will have also competition, the cost of doing business, and all of those decisions will ultimately feed into your decision on where to set the differential as a council.
I think what you're saying, though, is making sure that that's one of the principles driving our rating policy review. So I think that's something that we can consider and put as one of the principles is around...
Yeah, it should be part of the consideration. And I had one other question, was just the residential targeted rates, the 18.8 mil, what are they?
Those are mainly targeted rates supporting art and that sector, I believe. I can get that to you after the... We have certain funding requirements for activities, and that will mean then these are the funding we have to generate by this targeted rate, and we split it over the residential base, yeah.
I've just got one question, sort of comment. It would be helpful if whilst we got the breakdown in residential rates and commercial rates, it'd be a good idea to get the number of ratepayers in each category and perhaps the value of the land involved over those two slices. Yeah, and Mayor Little.
Yeah, there was a reference on one of the earlier slides to the vacant land differential, which I understand is not that old, but just curious to know how that is going.
Yes, so the vacant land differential was introduced as part of the last long-term plan. Owners of vacant land derelict buildings pay a rate equal to 5 times the base general rate. So that's considerably higher than commercial, the 3.7. When we first started, we had roughly 25 properties in that mix because we limited it to the inner city, because we linked it to inner city vibrancy. Now with some properties developing, it might be a bit less in terms of revenue. I think last year it was close to $800,000 that this rate collected. Now this year it probably is half because there might be one really big property falling into the commercial area which has been developed.
So we are collecting off that from that differential. Are we collecting the full value that we would expect, or are there arrears arising? I mean, some of those vacant properties will be from hard to contact owners, presumably. Just wondering how much of a challenge that poses.
I would need to come back to you on that.
Okay.
Kia ora, Mia. I can perhaps add a little context into that question. I think it's fair to say that there has been quite a significant amount of concern raised in respect of that rate. And we've had a lot of communication into our rating team about when the criteria for that rate can be lifted. So we've had people sort of looking to do minor works on their building, and then for us to change the rating category back to the commercial rates. Of course, that's not, they need to provide very clear evidence that they're going to be moving the change in the purpose of the building away from it just being vacant. So it has created quite a high level of requests and concerns and email correspondence, and that has made, in some instances, the collection of that revenue challenging.
Thanks, Andrew.
Okay. All right. We will move on to your next part, affordability, is it?
Thank you. So what's coming next is affordability differential DTR emissions. And
So I'll take questions at the end of the affordability, then questions at the end of the differential. Yeah, so we'll do it that way.
That's great. Thank you.
Read the slides. Yeah.
So starting by looking at rates affordability, as a general starter, affordability is really, really hard to define and fairly subjective. What we have, though, is a report from 2007, referred to as the Shen report, which sets affordability, sets a benchmark for affordability at roughly a 5% of rates to household income ratio. This is not a perfect measure, but widely accepted. The trouble is it only considers residential affordability, so it does not incorporate any commercial affordability, and it only focuses on income and not wealth. So that's a shortcoming. Nevertheless, it provides us quite an interesting snapshot of where affordability currently is, and that's on the graph on the right-hand side, and suburbs that are above the 5% rates to income ratio are highlighted in red, and you can see there's quite a lot of city fringes, Newtown, Kilburnie, that are highlighted in red, and also the southern suburbs are also typically above 5%. The largest, I guess, ratio is seen in Oriental Bay. However, that might be a bit distorted because property CVs are really, really high there. And we have commissioned some external analysis on affordability, and we will report back to that. That goes much more into detail for the next workshop or for the third workshop we have planned. However, I think what's quite interesting for councillors, we tried to do some predictions and some forecasts of affordability in 5 years' time and in 10 years' time using publicly available data, what we have published in our LTP and what we could find in the water service delivery plan. And in 5 years' time, so at the moment, if I just go back 1 second, you have a couple of suburbs in the city fringes and south that are above the 5% level, and just using LTP data on rates and TRQY water service data and scaling up income using treasury data, you will see that in 5 years' time, most suburbs will be above that 5% thresholds. And in about 10 years, almost all suburbs will be above the 5% thresholds of household income. There will be even some that are above 10% of rates to household income, such as the ones there, Berhampur, Kelburn, Newtown, Rongotai, and Oriental Bay. Now, this at the moment is very, very high level based on what we had in the LTP and the forecasts of Greater Wellington of TRQY. However, it points a picture that we should monitor affordability quite closely. And the other thing is when you look on a suburb analysis, rating policy changes might affect the relative affordability between suburbs considerably. So we'll always support anything we do with such an analysis. The other thing to add here is when we talk about affordability, I made a separate slide on water charges and affordability, because council won't be anywhere setting those charges anymore, so that will be done by TRQY. We don't have the most recent charges for next year yet. As soon as we have them, we will of course update the affordability by suburb. Initial estimates, it grows by about 13% on average. Noting that the draft water service strategy will update these numbers and could be higher. And interesting, the pricing mechanisms will be also changes, and as TRQY considers harmonization and greater use of volumetric and fixed charges. Now, typically fixed charges are quite regressive, so they will impact affordability for lower value households or lower CV properties considerably more than higher value properties. This is needed because the Water Service Act requires that all properties are rated in a different form than based on capital value, so volumetric and fixed charges. And this will be happening because TRQY has also signaled there will be out the residential water meters progressively across the Wellington region from the next triennium onwards. I know I rushed this a little bit, but it would be.
That's fine. So we just take questions on this section. I've got Councillor Matthews and Councillor Tiffenbacher.
Yeah, Vincent, so my question is, those affordability projections, when you were looking at water charging, were you anticipating, did those projections include the fact that it would be moving to a capital basis, or were you looking at the current method of water charging?
We were entirely looking at the current method of water charging based on CV and uplifting that with the 13% in the plan.
Yeah, so that's going to be significantly different when we move to a fixed charge rather than capital charge.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that we can do further modelling on once we get that information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tiffenbacher.
It's scary, isn't it? I guess the question is, I note that the suburbs that in 10 years' time we're talking about being over 10%, 3 of the 4 are probably actually quite low income households, which is obviously concerning. Theoretically, with the way TRQY will charge by water instead of through CV, it means that they will actually have a higher increase in water charges than a more affluent house, if you like, so we're going to see a distortion of that as well. Do we do any comparisons with other cities to see how the unaffordability in other cities compares to Wellington?
So two things. The research which we will commission will benchmark to other cities, which we have commissioned. At the moment, water is charged on a capital value basis, and that will move to a volumetric charge. So it's really, really hard to say how much more someone will pay, because it depends on the actual consumption. As soon as I have any data, I will be able to answer that.
Thank you. Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much. When you talk about fixed charging as being inequitable because the lower value houses will actually be paying a proportionally high amount compared to the income, but if you look at the other end of the scale, then if you look at, say, retired people, they have very little income, but they may have a multi-million dollar house. So is that becomes inequitable too, doesn't it? Or does it become more equitable because everyone is paying the same? And is this a government desire to not have fixed charging? Because if you look at the electricity, gas, all of these other services, they have a fixed charge. So is there a comparison between these different services?
I don't think we'll make a comment on whether or not it's equitable each way. I think it's completely open to interpretation, right? Yeah.
Yep, I think it's been set for us really how we've got to do it. Councillor Osborne? And then I'll go to the councillors online.
Thanks, Chair. Just a real quick question around that shift to Te Wai away from CV towards fixed charging. Will we as a council be modelling the impact of that, or is that really something that is more in Te Wai's hands?
So at the moment, we don't know how much of a fixed charge there will be, or whether it's a volumetric charge. We can, as soon as we have some more clarity around that, definitely do some modelling.
And it will also just help to inform your rate setting as well, right? Because we really have to consider the impact from the charges through Te Wai as part of our rates as well, and think about them as a combined as opposed to two separate bills, because ultimately it's the same community that are paying these, regardless of whether or not it's come from Wellington City Council or Te Wai. So we really have to make sure the two of these go hand in hand.
Thank you. Then we'll just go to the councillors online. First, Councillor Compton and then Councillor McNulty.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you, Rona. I couldn't agree more. And thank you, Councillor Osborne. We owe a duty of care to all of our community, irrespective of whose bill they're paying. Just coming back to the unaffordability piece within 10 years, I was so deeply disturbed to see so many, if not almost all of our suburbs being in that position of being classed as unaffordable. It makes me quite upset, actually. And I guess it's more of just a forewarning to my council colleagues that when we come to do the LTP, we're going to have to be very, very clear around where we go with this to essentially start to rein this pie back in. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McNulty?
Yeah, I'm just seeking
Deputy Mayor
clarity.
McNulty. Sorry.
Oh, good. So the draft water services strategy has a 5-year track of what fixed charges will be, but we haven't used those for the assumption of water rates. We've used a capital value model. Is that correct?
That's right. Essentially, we used this year's water charges and uplifted them by 13% over time or per year.
Would it be possible to do the work using what's the 5-year track of the draft water service strategy, albeit it's being revised at the moment and likely to be even higher, just because that at least is the best information we currently have for the trajectory of water charges, at least for the next 5 years?
I'm sure we can update that, and I know there will be a new draft water service strategy coming out end of this month, so maybe we already can use some updated data from there in time for workshop 3, probably.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Rogers?
Yeah, I was just going to ask about the bullet point, or I guess the asterisk that was provided over the future rates affordability that mentioned that we're estimating that wage growth does not continue beyond 2030. So I just mean in terms of calculating affordability, if we're saying over the 10 years that we're forecasting ahead, the majority of that, we're assuming there's zero wage growth?
Sorry, that was very unfortunate wording from me. What we have done is we flatlined any increases, so we used the best estimate for wage growth in year 5, and we used that through the remaining 5 years.
Right, so if it was like a 2.3 or a 3%, you would then use that for every year going on?
That's right.
Okay.
Okay. I just had a question. Just when we talk about affordability in 10 years' time, has that taken into account the the government's proposed 2 to 4% rates capping?
Everything is modeled based on the LTP, so it did not take into account the 2 to 4% rates capping
Okay.
Noting, however, that based on the 24-34 long-term plan,
Yeah.
a lot of those out years have quite lower rates increases.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. We can. No more questions on that one. So I think we can move to the differentials section.
Thank you. Thank you. So the next session is on the differentials, and the first thing, the general rate differential, you will see a little graph on the right-hand side, and that compares general rate differentials from Wellington with other metro councils, Auckland and Christchurch, Hamilton, and our neighboring councils, Hutt and Porirua. The blue graph or the blue bar represents our residential rates contribution to total general rates, and the red bar represents the commercial component. So you can see in the case of Wellington, the residential and commercial contribution to the general rate is very, very similar. So it's 52% is contributed by all residential ratepayers, 48% by the commercial ratepayers. There is also, as we discussed previously, we also have a vacant land differential. However, it contributes 0.2% of the total rate, so it's so small it does not even show on this graph. Other councils have a smaller or a bigger gap between residential and commercial rates, or residential and commercial general rates contributions, and most notably Auckland and Christchurch, where the share of the commercial contribution to general rates is much, much smaller. And I have some actual data on the next slide, some actual dollar values. However, before that, I'd like to quickly state some of the considerations when you set that commercial differential, or any differential at all. It does not need to be a commercial differential. There are other differentials such as rural differentials, vacant derelict housing differentials, short-term accommodation provider differentials. One thing you consider is anything that's in section 113B, and that could be, in our case, we have commercial properties are able to deduct tax. Commercial properties should pay for the commuter base that comes into the city. And last but not least, any move from the commercial base would increase or would harm our residential affordability, which a couple of slides before is a lot of suburbs are already above 5%. So all of those considerations play effect in the commercial differential setting. Some actual data is here, and this is for a typical inner city 1.5 million commercial property. And we have the rates for Auckland, Christchurch, Wellington, Hamilton, Porirua, Hutt City. And what you can see overall, Wellington City has the highest commercial rates, while Auckland has quite considerably lower rates. We are quite similar in terms of commercial rates to Porirua. Porirua actually has a slightly higher commercial rate component than us for that 1.5 million property. However, in Wellington, in addition, we have that downtown targeted rate, which makes our rates at least as high or a little bit higher than Porirua's. Our commercial rate is also quite close, comparable, the commercial rate itself, to Hutt City. So we are closer to our neighboring councils than other metro councils. That was the session on this. Happy to take any questions.
It adds into it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. So the downtown targeted rate is a specific targeted rate applied to commercial properties within our central business district. On the right-hand side, you have a map of the boundaries. of the downtown targeted rates. In general, a downtown targeted rate is not uncommon. Several metro councils have this, for example, Auckland, Christchurch, and Napier. And while it was initially introduced to subsidize free parking, the downtown target rate has evolved to fund tourism and economic development activities. And this includes part funding of 4 activities. Part funding meaning this activity uses the downtown target rate and something else, which typically is the general rate, which then has also a residential and a commercial component. So it funds 50% of the Wellington Development Agency venues, 40% of Takina, 70% of visitor attractions, and 25% of galleries and museums. So that's governed by our revenue and financing policy when we look at the activity funding mix. And moving on with some actual statistics. So the DTR currently contributes 18.7 million to the total rates requirement, breaks down to an extra $1,724 for 1 million commercial property. Vast majority is paid by a rather small group. It's a rate that's levied on the capital value. So the larger your capital value, the more of the DTR you pay. And we have commissioned an economic impact assessment, an EIA of the downtown targeted rate. And what the aim here is to get some measure of a return on investment of those commercial properties in the CBD that pay for that downtown targeted rate. This will also include targeted consultation with stakeholders, and we will report back. We will report back for workshop number 3. There are also some, when you want to consider alternatives to the DTR, and there's some modeling of possible alternatives in the appendix for information purposes. This could involve spreading the costs over all other commercial ratepayers or all other commercial and residential ratepayers to use the general rate to fund those activities. Of course, this will benefit the inner city properties, inner city commercial properties. However, other ratepayers would pay more. We can also, this map is not set in stone, we can also consider changes to the catchment area if council would wish to do so.
Thank you. We can take some questions now. Councillor Young, but I'll let you get back to the table because I think you had a commercial one. But I'll go to Carl in the meantime, to Councillor Tiffenbacher.
Hey, can we just go back to the previous slide just before this one? No, one just before that, sorry. Okay, so I have a question. My property is worth 1.65 million in Granada North, so it doesn't pay the downtown levy. But I'm looking at my rates bill right here. The Wellington City Council component is $24,392, so $10,000 more than a property that's at 1.5. So I'm going to question that data because I don't think that can be accurate. And also what would leave me out of that is, on top of that, there's another $2,600 in Greater Wellington Regional Council, which was also a multiplier of things. So it's just a little bit misleading because that looks as though I don't get it. A property that's supposedly only 150,000 is not going to be paying 10 grand and less. So I'd just like you to review that data because I think it's wrong.
I think if you look at the asterisk at the bottom, is that the water charges? It excludes water charges?
No, I've got my bill right here. Just the straight Wellington City Council rate is, because I pay water on top. So I pay another
I think
$12,000 in water.
It's really, really difficult to look at one rates bill compared to where we're talking here, which is around that typical inner city $1.5 million commercial property. I mean, we could
1.65 though. That's not going to be the differential, though, right? Another $10,000.
No, but we don't know what your property has, and we'd need to look into that more.
Okay, but can we just check that because I think that data looks suspicious.
We can absolutely check that, and we can check GST because my modelling excludes GST. Yeah.
Yeah. What? You want a question? Yeah, I think it was using it as a comparison just to check the data, so I think that's fine. Councillor Young. Okay, all right. Councillor Osborne.
Thanks, Chair. Can you just quickly expand on, it's the previous slide, your point around the differential reflects the commuter base into the city? What are you getting at there?
Sure. So the logic, which is in our RNF as well, is that we have a large commuter base that comes into the city and uses the services provided by the city, and they don't really contribute in terms of rates. That's why, because they live outside the city, so that's why the commercial operator that employs the commuters pays for the services.
Okay, I just had the question about the vacant land, and I know it was a really small part of it, but how much of a percentage of that vacant land rates that we're collecting relates to council-owned land? Because I'm thinking about Tanako Civic Square, where we've got the old buildings that were demolished on there.
So I can double check that, but my understanding is none relates to council-owned properties.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we don't charge extra rates for our vacant land.
No, and it might not be classified as vacant in the system because it's quite hard to actually classify and identify vacant land.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think that's no more questions for that section. We'll move on to business improvement districts.
Yes, so the next two slides are business improvement district and then the remissions, and this links quite nicely to Jeff Lawson that has been here before and said that he wants to review the bid policy.
Yeah.
So currently, just as again a little bit of context, currently we have 6 bids in Wellington. Bid is a partnership between a local authority and a business community. Those bids are Miramar, Candela, Destination KRL, which is short for Kilburney, Rongotai, Lyle Bay, Dava, Karori, and Johnsonville. And so at the moment, those bids are raising $560,000 annually. We set a rate on behalf of the bid and collect that money on behalf of the bid. There are also Newtown and Berhampore are considering a likely future bid. So it is something where there is quite some interest from the commercial sector.
But it's basically money in, money out, essentially.
That's
yeah,
right.
so we don't touch it for any other general rates, or it just goes straight back to those bids. Yeah.
That's exactly correct.
Okay. Any questions? Sorry.
So can I just clarify what is raised in the catchment for Miramar, for example, goes back to Miramar. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, basically. So, in all those catchments. So we don't. It doesn't get applied to general or other rates elsewhere.
Correct.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. I think that's pretty clear. So we can move on to remissions. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Remissions. So what you have in front of you is a list of our remissions. Where we provide partial remissions for certain conditions, such as we have partial remissions for properties undergoing earthquake strengthening, for low-income ratepayers, for Maori land, and for water leaks and rural properties. Why do I say partial remission? Because typically the remission only covers a general rate component or a targeted rate component. And what's quite interesting is we remit, or we predict based on the modeling, close to 5 million in remissions in 26-27. And this is mainly driven by our 3 biggest remissions, which is, first of all, the low-income remission, where we top up the central government's low-income remission. And the second biggest remission, that's roughly 2.4 million, which we spend on the, or we expect to spend on the low-income remission. The second largest is the earthquake valuation uplift, which is mainly driven by large commercial buildings. And the idea is that if they develop, then we don't want the valuation uplift from the development to be rated, because it would de-incentivize development. And the third thing is a rural open space remission, which accounts for the fact that rural properties may have or sometimes have a valuation which is far above the economic use value. So those are the three big ones. Everything else is small remissions, but it is something where we would like councillor input where you would like to see future remissions, for example.
Okay, any questions on this, Councillor Osborne? Oh, sorry, Councillor Rogers. Sorry.
Mine was just a question around the mechanics, particularly pertaining to earthquake valuation uplift. And my understanding is, say a developer was to earthquake strengthen a building and pay rates for the period in which the earthquake strengthening was being undergone. In terms of the valuation uplift, they wouldn't receive that discount if they were then to sell the property on, because the owner of the rates account would change, and the owner for the new rates account would also not receive that discount.
That is correct. Under the current policy, the remission goes with the owner that undertakes the property, and it gets void if you sell the property. We can certainly look into that remission more.
Cool. Thank you.
Any other questions on remissions? Nope, thanks. We'll move on to use of land.
Thank you. So this is the last topic on efficient use of land. I label it setting the rating base. It really is on the land value versus capital value discussion, and I know we have looked at this as part of the last LTP. And one really, really good starting point, and a rather recent starting point, is the report from the Productivity Commission using land for housing, which was published in 2019. And what they find, in summary, I've put on the slide, which is that a land value rating system encourages development and encourages, well, how they stated, land flow to its highest value use, and at the margin discourages holding underdeveloped land. So that's a very, very clear finding. What they also say, the Commission acknowledges that changing back to a land value rating would cause significant administrative cost and disruption for the councils. I have on the right-hand side, which is from that report, it's no more 100% accurate. Councils that have a LV system as their rating base and councils that have a CV base, as you can see, the blue ones are having a capital value basis. That's the vast majority. And we have seen in the past some councils switching from a land value system to a capital value system. Hutt City Council, Palmerston North City Councils, and Thames Coromandel. What I want to say, both systems have merits and shortcomings that comes from the literature. If one system would be always preferred, probably everyone would have it. And there is no need to only rate on land value and capital value. So you can have your general rate on a land value basis, but your targeted rates still on a capital value basis where you think you have a consumption component. To underline this, I've done a little bit of, the team has done a little bit of modeling and produced a high-level heat map. This is again not 100% accurate as it uses a previous iteration of the budget, but there are some high-level things which we can say. So we modeled what would happen if we switch to an LV system for setting the general rate. And the general rate will be the main rate we set because water charges are gone. So the rest is downtown targeted rate and sector targeted rates. And when we look at residential ratepayers, which is the second graph on the right-hand side, we see that 60% of all residential ratepayers would be better off paid by the other 40%. Main beneficiaries would be inner city apartments, which are highly developed, and outer suburbs. Impact for around the city fringes is mixed. When we look at the commercial ratepayers, we see a a very interesting pattern. So the biggest beneficiaries under a land value system are the utility providers, so our free water assets, which go now to TRQY because they're underground, so essentially they have a land value of 0. The other thing which we see, the biggest commercial buildings that benefit are obviously also the high developed ones, the BNZ building, Deloitte buildings, those really, really big ones from a commercial point would benefit. Other commercial buildings would pay more, and as the utilities really benefit substantially, the majority of commercial buildings would pay more. We can bring updated modeling to the next workshop that has the current budget or the most recent iteration of it.
Okay, thank you. We have a few on the list. So first up, Councillor Young.
We used to have land value rating here until, 1992? So why did we change? And assuming, because that's 40 years ago, something like that. Why did we change then, and why are we even reconsidering it now if we've used it and dumped it?
I'm not 100% sure. I would assume that it was in the context of the Shand report. No, can't be. 2007, yeah.
We tried to go back and have a look at this. Unfortunately, we were unable to find the records around what the driver was for the change from land to CV. Yep, possibly. We can look into that further.
Okay, Councillor Arubayi.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Excuse my ignorance, but I just want to get a bit of clarification. So it is possible to charge on both LV and CV, like have both systems at the same time, and would that create any issues for a ratepayer? Like, would they be double charged, for example? I'm just trying to understand how that works.
So you absolutely could have your general rate on an LV basis and your targeted rate on a CV basis. You can't have your general rate on both a CV and an LV basis, but you can have one on the one basis and one on the other basis. As a matter of fact, many councils use that in the transition period from one system to the other system.
So you could essentially have both systems working side by side type of thing, and not necessarily move the whole council to move on only one system.
That's right. You could have a different basis for the targeted rates. Noting that the targeted rate is really, really a very small component once the water rates are gone.
Speaking as an ex-rating officer, I have to say, how practical or able to do that in an operational sense, how sometimes restricted the systems are, the actual, the IT.
I mean, that's definitely a consideration, and it wouldn't be easy if we were to move. We would have to understand that and unpack that and bring that impact back to you in terms of cost, time, capability, etc. But that would just form part of the discussion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Matthews.
Yeah, just in relation to Councillor Young's question, I mean, the genesis of this was a decision made in the district plan as an amendment, which was when we upzoned the city, that in order to kind of drive the development of the upzoning, that we would consider a change to a land value rating system. So I am very interested. That is what I would like to see more in the advice. Great to have this team here, but I'm very interested in Liam's involvement and that city shaping and economic analysis, because that is, I think, for those of us who have supported this work, that is a key driver. And I am also very interested in the interplay between the move to a capital charge for, sorry, I keep saying the wrong one, to a fixed charge for water combined with a land value rating, because there is the potential for these to interplay to make rates more affordable for lower income people. So I think I'm interested in that. I understand this is a new and changing environment. However, it's going to be very stark when we move to fixed water charging, in that some of the wealthiest people are going to get, when we look back on that affordability slide, some people will get a big cut to what they are paying in rates in terms of the water charge, and the increase that I know that we've got to look at affordability on all, but the increase is largely water charging, which we have limited. So I'm just sort of signalling that's some information that I'm interested in more of to help guide our decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, this is just this kicking off kind of workshop to make sure that everyone around the table is kind of across things. There's more work to do, right? And we know that. But that will involve, and what we've heard from some of you around the table is wanting to understand two different viewpoints, right? So getting a CV subject matter expert or pro CV versus a pro land value, and kind of having that debate play out. So those kind of things we can look at doing as we progress through this. On the water charges, yes, once we've got that information and we can easily go away and model that, we will do that and bring that information back to you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Just here on the slide there, it has in brackets down the bottom in terms of commercial ratepayers that it is mainly driven by utilities benefiting. I'm just wondering how much that is kind of distorting the who benefits, and if there's any way of kind of addressing that impact with the utility providers, something like a targeted rate on that. Is that something that could be explored?
We could absolutely explore this. The thing with a targeted rate, they pay for a certain service, certain properties receive, and you would need to argue that there's an extra service for the utility providers, which probably is a bit more challenging. But we definitely can look a bit more into that. It might be a challenge.
Councillor Chung? Sorry?
Thank you. Two things.
Oh, hang on. Sorry, Councillor O'Brien hadn't quite finished.
Just the first part of that question around how much is that driving the kind of 20%, 80% there, the utilities factor?
It's driving the analysis substantially, because utilities have our free water assets have quite a high capital value and zero land value, so the total general rates component would move on to the others. I'm not able to give you the exact 20 to 80% without looking at the model and doing some modeling again, but it would be a substantial amount. It would.
I guess as a reminder, as we saw with the property valuations last year, there was a significant uplift in the property values for utilities, which saw a much higher increase in rates charged, and those were our assets at the time. So, yeah, moving from CV, LV would have that big swing.
When you do come back, it'd be quite interesting just to also see with those, when we talk about utility providers, we're talking about our water assets, which are going over to Te Aki Wai, and we know that they are questioning whether being rated as a commercial is appropriate, whether they should be rated residential in terms of a rating base. So we need to understand what that has impact as well, that might have. Okay. Councillor Chung?
Two things. I recall when we went through this in the last long-term plan and we discussed the land value versus CVs, and it was mentioned then that only 2% or less than 2% of properties exchanging or being sold are actually on valuing the land. And so getting an accurate figure for land value would be extremely difficult, because you couldn't use what the market was doing because there are too few examples to use. And so that was a difficulty then. Would that still be applicable now?
So we can get David Nagel or others from QV in and talk about that again this time. It's probably best to hear the most recent update from them.
Yep, great, thanks. And the second thing is that if we actually changed to a land value system, that would change the complete demographics of of the city, because if you look at what we have, say, in Island Bay, Lyle Bay, where we have the big box retailers there, so you've got to look at if they had to actually pay just on the land, then would that actually increase their cost of being there? So would they actually not have a big box businesses out in that area? And exactly the same with north of Wellington. Say if you're looking out to Kaiwara, these areas there, would that actually change? So that changes the whole nature of the design and development of Wellington, wouldn't it?
I am not too sure if the rates paid would have a big enough impact to change the development as a whole, or if it would be, as the Productivity Commission suggests, be at the margin. So I would lean to the Productivity Commission's research on that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rogers, then Councillor Uiti, then we'll call it a quit for this round of questions, because I know we're slightly over time now.
Yeah, it was just a clarification about whether, I guess, thinking about other utilities, whether we currently levy rates against our roading infrastructure.
I will need to check on that.
Okay, because I guess when we were talking earlier about the general base rate, and you couldn't have, LV and CV on the general base rate, whether there was, I think, an argument around the provision of those services being neither commercial nor residential in nature, and they are kind of in a somewhat different third category that might be appropriate.
We'll come back to you on that one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Uiti?
Hello. Is it possible to create scenario calculators so that the public can see whether, based on a scenario, whether or not their rates go up or down?
We could look into what we could do there, for the community to be able to look at that. Yep.
Okay, thank you. So there's just final questions, but I do have we've covered a lot, and I'm just, and given, will this council have to make decisions about what we proceed with? Because of the capacity and the capability, and it's not against sort of the officers here, but knowing what we have to do for the LTP, what is the, can we do it all, or is there going to be some considerations by this council? Because a bit like the strategy workshop we had before, we have a lot on there, but we have to make.
We would have to prioritise what we could deliver and the timelines that we could deliver it in. I guess at the start I talked around making sure that we were able to consult and engage with the community separate from the long-term plan, so that they weren't confusing the whole how much rates I have to pay from a budget perspective versus what's my share of the total rates, right? So I guess having that engagement with the community separately from the LTP is really important. However, we are, that timeline is quite tight for this long-term plan, given that we're bringing a draft budget in December. So we would have to prioritise what we could and couldn't achieve and provide some further advice around capacity, etc., within the teams.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Randall?
Yes, I sort of just want to follow up that to make sure that you have the best opportunity to have a look at these issues. So you're really saying that if we could look at these issues during this calendar year, we could go into the long-term plan with some clearer direction about where we're going with some of the bigger options we have been put today around the rates policy. So, for example, our land value versus capital value, if we could actually sort out a direction or before December, that would make the long-term plan process much easier rather than trying to do it in addition to the long-term plan process next year. Is that what you're sort of saying?
Yeah, I guess it's making sure that we're having the conversation with the community, not part of the actual long-term plan. It would still be a part of the long-term plan given that it is a change, but separate consultation or engagement aside from that. So to make sure that you have all of the information, that we're able to provide the analysis, get the experts in, making sure that we're involving Liam's team and things like that, we would just have to look at how we prioritise that.
Okay, thank you.
And one last question from Councillor Matthews.
Yeah, just wanted to note that this piece of work was already delayed last triennium because of capacity. So just voicing that it would be really great to be able to come to a decision one way or another this term.
Noted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and thank you. And we'll look forward to the next workshop on this.
Thank you.
Thanks, team.